Podcast. My name is Don, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a consultant in life sciences. I help companies manage complexity and increase performance. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by James Zanewicz. James is James is the business officer at Tulane University School of Medicine. He's had a successful career focused on innovations and technology transfer, and I look forward to discussing his involvement in life sciences. Welcome, James.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So can you tell listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I guess my background in this field, I started as a chemist because my dad told me I should pick a career that was useful and valuable after sending me to a liberal arts college. I liked the liberal arts, and he was like, "You can dabble in those, but you should do something that can actually get you a job." So I majored in chemistry and went and worked as a chemist for a while, and I worked with a water-soluble polymer known as guar, and my job was literally to make paint and watch it dry. And I determined this thing did not work in paint, and determined I did not want to sit at the bench anymore, which led to going into law school because I didn't know what else to do in the 90s, and did that. Realized that's not what I wanted to do. Went and worked in TV and film for 5 years because that was a logical jump at the crazy TV show Extra, where I was there from season 1 through 5, covering celebrities, tabloid news, and real news. Went through 3 different cycles of that place, so learned a lot about communications and communications to different audiences from that. Realized that I wanted to make a career shift and was fortunate to find someone who helped me into a job at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, in tech transfer and corporate partnerships. And because I had worked in new media for the TV show Extra, which was AOL and the internet at the time, they thought I had like a software background, which I did not. Because I was a chemist, they thought I had a science background, which I did. And I'd passed the patent bar to make my mother happy. And so with that, they had one of the first interdisciplinary institutes in the country, the Beckman Institute at the University of Illinois, and brought me in to help with their partnerships, collaborations, innovations, which kind of opened this whole world for me. After a couple of years there, I went to work at the University of Louisville, which is my hometown. They brought me in at a really young age, probably younger than anyone should be made a director of an office to start their office. And luckily, I was a director of one to start, so I got to make my mistakes on myself first. Grew that office to about 17 or 18 at the time when HHMI came knocking at their Genelia Research Campus. One of the most innovative experiments in science is how they like to refer to it, and I think that's true. It's a place where scientists come together and really live together, work together, innovate. They have a subsidized bar in their building, which is amazing for having drinks and innovating around ideas. Figuring out how to transfer that knowledge out into the world. And I almost talk about that role more as innovation philanthropy in a way, because HHMI is very well funded and develops a lot of tools for scientists. And their goal is to get those out produced at a high quality at a low price. So scientists can buy 10 and advance their research instead of one. So it's almost the purest form of tech transfer. And I think what was actually intended when the National Academies first talked about innovation and how innovation should move out into the marketplace. After that, I saw a role at my alma mater of Tulane for this chief business officer for the School of Medicine. They advertised for an MD or a DVM, and as many times in my life, I ignored their qualifications and told them why they should hire me. And fortunately, they did, and got to come in and once again kind of start and create this thing at the university at Tulane, and focus on biomedical science, on innovation in the really, really broad sense, really more of that business development, the way a company does it. And that can mean for us, like, it's not working. We're not the tech transfer office. We don't handle the inventions, the patenting, the licensing here. We handle any kind of relationship that might come into the academic enterprise and for research. And that's where it's really fun for me. And I've gotten to create something new yet again.
Yeah, it's interesting because on the podcast before we've had Trivia Frazier as well, and I know she's somewhere out there as well, and and is
just a few minutes away
as well. So yeah, I mean, she did a fabulous podcast and told me all about tissue on a chip, of which I knew nothing about, and she educated me well. So yeah, it was a great interview as well. So looking at your bio, I mean, you more or less, and I mean, you kind of described it as well, just now in your introduction. What is it that draws you to want to be closer to innovation and the things that people are doing in terms of innovating, especially in life sciences?
So having been a scientist and a chemist, I always like to joke that without chemistry you can't do anything, because everything starts from that. And so chemists are able to kind of see how things are put together and made, because you need the elements to do anything. And that's how I see innovation is, your job is to help scientists who are doing the elements in the really scientific way. But your job in business development, innovation, all those pieces, is to pull together the other elements in the ecosystem in a way that can help optimize thing, or have that biggest reaction, the biggest explosion, the biggest bang for your buck. And the reason I really enjoy doing that in life science is because of the impact you can have on human health, human life, and the world as a whole. Like, the things these people are doing are so cutting edge, so mind blowing, and have the ability to change the world or combat a global pandemic, as we saw in the last couple of years. And that is what really drives me and gets me out of bed every day. Is I don't want to be at the bench, but I want to help the people who love that and want to do that every day do the most they can with what they're producing, and to bring them the most resources so they can do that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's so much fun to watch people that really understand this stuff, kind of,
Hmm.
make the science sing, if you will, and deliver for mankind. And so, I mean, in the case of the pandemic, I mean, I truthfully was afraid because, I started thinking, just based on what I know, are we going to be sitting here for 10 years while we're waiting for a cure? And we're
Hmm.
all, more or less, locked in our homes and watching the population sort of quickly fade away. Right. And so,
Absolutely.
it was really terrifying. And then to see, somebody go, oh no, this is a thing with a spike protein. We can identify spike proteins. We can do this and do that, and make things happen. And next thing you know, we've got vaccines and other things on the way. So yeah, great to work with such a brilliant group of people. In terms of organizations that you work with, I also saw that you
Hmm.
work with AAIH. What is it that they do?
Yeah, so that is the Alliance for Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare, and it's a fairly new organization. It's been around a couple years, and they are really focused on the intersection of AI, or artificial intelligence, and the impact it can have on advancing healthcare. And that can be in many ways. It can be for drug discovery. It can be analyzing patient data to figure out personalized medicine in better ways. Lots of things in that space, and this is the group of folks who came together to, because they have that common bond in that space, that new area of intersection of innovations. And I was fortunate enough to get introduced to them, because the people who were helping them form that had been involved in what is known as ARM, or the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, that we had been heavily involved in. And so, because of that introduction, they had no academics engaged. I was like, Tulane, we have a tremendous computer science department. We actually had done away with ours post Katrina. We did away with a lot of our engineering programs, except for ones that adapted to and pertained to life science. So we kept like biomedical engineering, chemical engineering, those. But other programs have been done away with. And we had brought back computer science in a really interesting way. It's focused on AI and machine language, machine learning, but it has to apply to another discipline. And so what
Mm.
we're doing in that space, and the fact that we're just starting it and doing it in a very current way, without the weight of decades or hundreds of years of not hundreds of years for computer science obviously, but decades of what had been there before, was really fascinating. And we had some really great conversations, and we're able to work with that group and actually not just look at the industry side, but at how the academic piece might play into that, and how we might scale that to everyone across the US.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, it's interesting to me how many new companies that I get introduced to, and then they'll say, we're doing this thing, but along with that thing is, some level of artificial intelligence. And so I mean, it's
Yeah.
almost like I'm hearing more and more companies that are coupling, the two together now, with, hey, we have a diagnostic that, oh, by the way, has an artificial intelligence component to it. And we have, other things that we're working on, that will help with, drug discovery, or helping with, whatever it may be in terms of decisioning. So you could see that, the future will be, something tied to artificial intelligence, and having people think about, sort of, the ways that we bring that to light, but also sort of the parameters that we do it with, right? Has got to be, thought through as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. For folks who are interested in that space, I'm happy to connect them to that organization. Our chair of the board, Nahid, is phenomenal, in really driving us forward in creative ways. But if people are at the space of that intersection of artificial intelligence and healthcare in any way, which anyone who's touching those probably is, it's a great organization to get involved in, and it's still early where they can really have a voice in how it forms.
Excellent. And then also you helped to start and have received or actually recently come back to co-chair the Biotech Transfer Committee with the organization Bio. I've said that a little bit, sort of combined, but and so what is that committee, and what did you come back for a second time?
Yeah, so BIO is now known as the Biotechnology Innovation Organization. Used to be known as the Biotechnology Industry Organization. And the first time that committee came around, it was focused on enhancing the intersection between universities and the corporate realm at a time when they didn't really speak to each other as much as they did now. Like tech transfer, what I like to say tech transfer 1.0 was a lot of, you would patent things, you would try and find a licensee, and that often meant that your scientists would find a licensee because someone would call them. There wasn't a whole lot of aggressive marketing. And you would hopefully negotiate your license, and you would sit and wait for your royalty checks to come in. And obviously innovation and what tech transfer has become takes many different facets now. And so when we did the first iteration of the Tech Transfer Committee, it was much more focused on that prior definition and how it was starting to evolve. And so, I was paired with somebody from a startup company, because not many of the major companies were as engaged in the intersection as much. They would source things, but they would often source them, from a startup or something else, and never directly engage with the universities as much. They would engage with individual scientists more than the university as a whole. Did that for a number of years, stepped out to allow some new leadership to come in, and we fast forward to 15 plus years later, and the co-chair on the academic side had stepped down. Sharon Simonis from Eli Lilly, who is absolutely amazing. We've grown up together in the industry for over 20 years now. We kind of got our first director level jobs together, and I was down the road at Louisville when she was in Indianapolis, and one of us, I can't remember, she invited me or I said, I want to bring my staff up. And we all got to know each other and have just kind of grown our careers together. But they said, hey, Sharon's co-chairing this now. We'd love for you to come back. And Sharon and I are working on assembling that team of people who are involved in that. And what does the next 2.0 of that innovation space look like for them, which is what was exciting for me. Like, the name will probably change from tech transfer to something else at some point. We don't know what that's going to be. We're working that out. The mission will be redefined a little bit. And it's something that we're really excited to be working on with Han Sauer, Pete Pellerito, Sarah Funkhauser at Bio on the Bio staff. And with Sharon kind of bringing that industry gravitas to bear and some of her friends and colleagues in that field, me from the academic side, pulling together some of the academic folks I know, and how do we make things go better, faster, get treatments out quicker to people than ever before. And that's what the committee is for. It's not nuts and bolts as much anymore as how do we help advance the ecosystem and give people cultural tools to enable things to happen quicker.
Yeah, and it's definitely needed. I mean, the just that area from my perspective is, unless you know exactly what it is that you're looking for and kind of how to get it, it is a very sort of, you kind of need a bit of a guide to help with just fostering things along as well. So yeah, I look forward to much more exciting news out of Bio, and hopefully we'll see an announcement with all of you named in terms of what the new name is, not the Tech Transfer Committee.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Us too. We're working on it hard. Sharon's gonna text me now and be like, "I sent you a document that you owe me comments on." So I'm going to get in trouble.
Right. We announced the new name on the podcast.
Right.
So my next question is that you've had a lot of roles, including serving on the board of directors for Autumn. What is Autumn, and what is it that they do?
So Autumn used to stand for the Association of University Technology Managers, and now it stands for Autumn because that again kind of goes back to an old term of technology managers that was in the state of the art. And when I was on the board, we actually made the decision to just go by the acronym because the words don't as much make sense anymore. But it's hard to explain what it is without explaining the history behind that. And that is the association that represents the individual professionals who are involved in technology transfer, knowledge exchange, whoever you want to call it. US usually more referred to as technology transfer, but the people inside universities at that intersection of the scientific or invention innovative world, which can include social innovation and other things now that were never thought of when it first came around, and the outside world. And that field arose in the 80s with the Bayh-Dole Act, when federally funded research for a long time, if you were funded at a university with federal dollars, the invention was owned by the federal government. You would file your invention report as an inventor. It would go and sit in a box somewhere in a back room of a file of the NIH or wherever it was, and not a lot happened with those. And Senator Bayh and Senator Dole realized that perhaps if we turned these over to universities and gave them the power to try and move these things forward, where they're on the ground with their faculty members, that would work really well. And it spurred a generation of this innovation field inside universities. It spurred entrepreneurial-minded faculty, and it almost. I think it's easy to argue that it really did help lead to the birth of biotech, because you had more universities spitting out companies, and a lot of those companies were health science, life science focused in some way, and helped drive that. So Autumn, which goes back to its roots being known as SUPA, the Society of University Patent Administrators, way back in the day, which tells you how far back it went, had a heavy hand in that, I think, with a lot of their efforts.
Very interesting. Yeah, I didn't actually know that. So, I mean, it definitely, has to help getting things much more, out in front of people rather than, storing them away at the NIH or somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And, we for sure are seeing, an awful lot of, companies come into the world and work on critical things. And so, even if it's at the sake of advancing the next level of science, it's great to have, things out in front of people instead of hidden somewhere in the background.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you also chaired the board of directors for ATTP for several years.
I'm giving you every acronym under the sun today.
So what is ATTP?
So ATTP, much like Autumn used to stand for, the Alliance of Technology Transfer Professionals, and now it's ATTP. And this is really interesting. It's an organization that exists to credential folks in the innovation or knowledge transfer profession around the globe. And it is an association of associations who have come together to do that. And it has innovation associations from every continent except for the one that doesn't have people. So you have Praxis in the UK, you have ASTP Proton in Europe, Red Transfer in Spain, KCA in Australia, Serema, like all these organizations. Autumn, of course, is a member. All these organizations, and I want to say it's at 15 now, have come together and said, here is the standard, which is known as the RTTP, or what used to mean Registered Tech Transfer Professional, of kind of professional achievement that we want to have. And it is a global standard. So the great thing is, while there are other professional accreditations that you can get that maybe just in the US or in the US and Canada, this is one where if you want to move to Europe or move to Australia or move to Asia, if you've achieved this RTTP status, it transfers with you and shows that you have achieved a level of professional competence where a decision-making jury of your peers reviewed your body of work, reviewed your case study, and said, yes, they are deserving of being recognized as someone competent in this profession.
Oh, very cool. I had no idea that there was a kind of an actual accreditation behind that. And, the interesting thing to me is the individuals that I know in any sort of tech transfer role, they typically, stay there for a few years, and then they oftentimes, just don't seem to stick with it. Like, I feel like, your career is quite different in that, you just have made an entire career out of this, and not only staying with the organization that you're in, but reaching out, much more as well, and just kind of, helping to build, as well, more or less the group in the profession.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's fascinating. There is a great book out now that I don't know if you've seen that I read just about a week ago called Workquake, and it talks about this and how the true skill that people need to develop is network, and it's not network inside your organization, but it's outside. And I think that's where I'm really fortunate to have done things like AIH and Bio and Autumn, and you're doing things that are outside your normal work day that you're not getting paid for, but you're meeting people, you're getting new ideas. They're moving on to somewhere else. Then you have connections at those places, and your network as people's careers grows for you as well. Whereas your network is only inside the organization you work in, and people don't tend to leave, then your network is insular. And it's fascinating reading that and then looking back at my career and how I've gotten everywhere I've gotten has been through a connection at some point that I made, and often through professional associations or by staying connected to colleagues in certain places. And that's kind of the advice I'd give to anyone young in any field is, get involved in those kinds of things for your area, or get involved in things not like that at your area. Sit at a bar and talk to the people beside you and get to know them. I've made some of the best business connections. Granted, I live in one of the best cities in the world to sit at a bar at, New Orleans. You can see in my painting, I'm going to the right side. I hit the wrong side. So this side, I have to remember which side's which. But little happy accidents like that can change the trajectory of your career. And I always tell people, take a moment and say hi. It's not hard.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I see a lot of people struggle with as well, is, how do you just make that initial connection? And oftentimes it is so important. I was telling somebody earlier today, I think my LinkedIn network has something like, 6,800 people in it today. Right. And I feel like every week we're adding somewhere between 50 and 100 people to my network, all in life sciences. I'm pretty particular about, people that say, hey, look, I do accounting and other stuff. I mean, I'm sorry, but most likely you won't be a connection. I have a good accountant, so thank you. But I mean, I do think it's important. And then kind of my next follow-up question to anybody that becomes a connection is, can we at least, meet? Can I understand a little bit more about what it is that you're doing? Because, one, they may be a good podcast guest, being a little selfish here. But in addition to that, just in general, I mean, if you're going to be a part of my network, what a shame it would be to have a network and not essentially use it for the good of tying people back together. I mean, I have an opportunity to kind of be the sort of the matchmaker, between people. And that's what I enjoy most. And you won't learn that stuff just making a connection on LinkedIn. I'm sorry.
No, Jeff, I think that gets back to what makes people happy in their career. And post-COVID, being at one of the things about Tulane, which I hadn't mentioned, is we were founded as a private university, but one with a public-facing mission. We were founded to combat yellow fever, so we're much like a public, even though we're private in many ways. And going through COVID here and helping to support our clinical enterprise, being in a school of medicine, working 7-hour days, 18 days a week, helping to set up vaccine clinics and things like that, changed my perspective on innovation and the outcome from innovation in a way that I'd never had before. Because seeing it up close and personal, seeing how it affected our physicians for the amount they were working. Because as much as I was working, I was in an office by myself and safe. But the kinds of things that we saw over the last 2 years really made me reevaluate, to the point where I worked with the corporate coach, Ashley Stahl, and her whole mantra is looking at what your skills are and then what drives you as a person and how they intersect. And we figured out like connectivity, service, things like that are my key skills that really, I think, position me well for where this is. And I think you probably have a lot of those as well yourself.
Yeah, I would say I left GE Healthcare after being with them for 18 years. My network on LinkedIn was all GE people. Back to your sort of being in your own little bubble, right? So, I mean, oftentimes when I needed information, it was just there. I mean, there were normally people that were working on the cutting edge things that were there. As I left, though, I started to
Absolutely.
see just that void. And I remember telling somebody, you know, I had all connections that were just GE people leaving GE. And yet whenever I left there, I feel like my network sort of went lots of different directions for a long time. And then now, like I said, it's more centered in healthcare and life sciences, and just trying to make sure that I'm more purposeful about it, because at some point I might run out of connections to make in LinkedIn, because I think you can only have 30,000 and then you run out. So I'm trying to be
We
more
just make Don Davis
purposeful.
too.
Right. Exactly. And then I get to manage 2 LinkedIn profiles. So, I mean, kind of coming back to this, right? So now you're the chief business officer for Tulane University School of Medicine. Tell me more about, you know, what it is that you do there, and you know, how are you helping, you know, organizations there?
Yeah, so it's interesting to me, and I've really enjoyed it because, again, it's like it's something different. It's creating something that hadn't been done somewhere else, and I've got a tremendous dean and our senior VP of health sciences and dean of the School of Medicine, Lee Ham, who, you know, when I saw the job posting, it was a little more focused on direct wins from clinical trials in short order, and, you know, generating money in the short term. And, you know, we talked about it when I was looking at the job, and I said, I really want to come do things for Tulane. It's my alma mater. I love the city. I owned a little place down here. Like, they knew I was committed to New Orleans. But I said, but, you know, here's the job I want. I want to commit and focus on relationships. And I want to focus on long-term things and not short-term wins like these outside consultants told you should. And I said, that's where we're going to have the huge wins. And he bought into my vision and has supported it fully the whole way. So I give him incredible props for being so visionary and just kind of trusting me to do what I do, but to do it in a new way that, you know, I hadn't proven myself yet. And so we came in, and instead of just focusing on, okay, we need to get sponsored research, clinical trials, the things that people always think of, we position our scientists as key opinion leaders. We go out and talk to venture capitalists, not just to invest in companies that spun out of Tulane, but we'll say, who have you invested in? And do we have a KOL for you? Or do we have a patient population they need for their clinical trial? Because New Orleans is one of the most diverse cities in the US. And it's a great place with great academic medical centers to do clinical trials, you know, a tremendous place for that. We have one of the 7 national primate research centers here in New Orleans as part of Tulane. You know, do we have students who could be your workforce? Do we have patient populations or organoids or animal models that could be useful? But, you know, all those broad things that you don't always think of, and many times of which we're not involved in. We're just making that introduction, much like you were talking about earlier, where we're bringing value to somebody. So when there is something that might bring value to Tulane, they always call us and think of us first. And it's been, you know, it's been a wild 7+ years and a lot of fun. And we keep evolving and changing. And with the pandemic, because I'd worked for Extra, which is the reason I threw that in before, we didn't have anyone in medicine doing communications. And obviously there was a tremendous need to communicate about COVID internally and externally with our community. And unfortunately, our assistant dean of finance, Margaret Bell, and I go drinking together on occasion, and she remembered this, and she's like, "You can do communications, so you're going to." So now that is in our wheelhouse as well. And so we have clinical marketing, we have communications, we have the business development, but they all sync together. Like, to be able to figure out how to tell the story about the science helps you communicate the science to not just the world, but your business partners. And that's why it's been so fun, because, you know, it's 7.5 years, but it's a new job all over again, just in the last 2. And I think if you're always looking forward, and Tulane, you know, we say we're an audacious university. We're out there to, you know, to do things to change the world. We have sites around the world. We're in the AAU, which are the top research universities in North America. But, you know, we're not the big behemoth that can't shift really quickly. We're a good mid-sized university, top tier research, but like when we want to shift and do something, you know, it's still an academic center, so it takes some work, but we can do it. We can actually move that rudder. And one of the other really exciting things happening now here as well is, in tandem with my efforts in the School of Medicine, we just brought in Kimberly Graham as our Chief Innovation and Entrepreneurship Officer. She's been on the ground a month. She is going to focus on innovation in that entrepreneurship space and startup companies, and how do we support them, and how do we create programming. And she has a gap fund to actually put money in and move those inventions forward. And like, I am so excited to partner with her and for us to roll forward and change not just the face of Tulane, but the face of New Orleans, and how we can help impact the world.
it is so important, especially in terms of entrepreneurship in healthcare, to have that,
Mm-hmm.
sort of training that takes you all the way through. I've done my fair amount of research, and broadly trying to look at where are all the places that if I were an entrepreneur today and I wanted to get trained on, how do I, create and develop a diagnostic, or how do I kind of follow something all the way through a drug pipeline? How do I do that, overall, but
Right.
also, at the right level, making sure that my company overall is scalable. And I can tell you that the resources that are out there are sparse, for
Exactly.
anybody to do it. And it feels a bit like they're here and there. So I know I've been, sort of like collecting, some of these things. And one of the things I'm personally working on is, some training course for people to, to go and take in terms of, entrepreneurship in healthcare, not
Mm-hmm.
teaching you anything about the science piece of it other than this is how you follow it through to actually get it to a scalable organization. So that's my hope is that I'll have enough time throughout the remainder of this year to pull the course together and, have it out there for people. But it's, I mean, this work that Kimberly could do with Tulane would be tremendous. It seems like as well.
Absolutely.
So there are three questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
Well, it's my scientists. Like, the fact that I get to work with these amazing people, and from early career to mid career to late career, like seeing the stuff they do and how excited they get just to come in and you try and uncover the mysteries of science every day. And that, honestly, that I get to see that first. It was one of the great things I loved about being in news back in the day was, I had access to the AP feed when there wasn't an internet. So I saw the news first, but now I see the science first. It's like the same thing. So
Yeah,
I guess I love that access and being on the front lines of innovation.
that's excellent. And what concerns you?
Oh, what concerns me? I think it's support for science in general. Are we putting enough money into it? Are we forgetting that we've gotten where we are because of the tremendous investments we made as a society? And is the government going to continue to support that, both in the direct investment in scientific research, but exactly what you were talking about, the pieces that surround that enable it to move out? And are we going to continue to evolve those in a way that support scientists as they evolve in their mind thinking, or their thinking in their minds and their careers?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important to just continue to one build a culture that fully supports science and doesn't sort of let people run away with these ideas that just can't scientifically be proven whatsoever. And then secondarily, I mean, continuing to educate people more broadly and make them interested in it as well is vital for any country, but especially in the United States.
Oh,
And last
definitely. And one of the
question.
creative things, oh, so go ahead. Sorry. I was
No,
going to
no,
say, one of
no,
the
go
creative
ahead.
things we tossed one little bullet in, I forgot that creative thing we've done exactly along the lines of what you're saying is we brought in an executive in residence, Elaine Ham, Dr. Elaine Ham has been tech transfer both sides, scientist both sides, investor, entrepreneur, COO, CEO, and just had $100 million deal with Boehringer Ingelheim for one of her startups. And she's in like working with our faculty on a daily basis about exactly what you're talking about. And she's someone who's done it. And I think that is having such an impact that I wish I'd done it 7 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, and for anybody that is interested, there's also an interview with Dr. Elaine Ham. We did that a few months ago as
Oh,
well.
nice.
So
Perfect.
yeah. Last question. What excites you?
What excites me? The city of New Orleans excites me, like, because it's not just what we have going on here at work, but it's a city that feeds your soul, that bubbles up, that forces you to slow down and enjoy life. And you'll have people who will want to talk about work, but they'll also want to go catch a Mardi Gras parade or go to Crawfish Fest or every weekend to some festival. We have the Red Dress Run coming up in 2 weeks, where everyone in the city will be in sneakers and a red dress. Gay, straight, doesn't matter. But it's we're a city that knows how to celebrate both our hard work and our eccentricity, and that's what does it for me.
So now I have one more question. Do you have your red dress ready to go?
I do. I got it off Amazon. I'm very excited. I'll send you a photo after the run.
That will be perfect. Yeah, I did my very first marathon anywhere was done in New Orleans, and I absolutely loved it. Like you said, I mean, just the celebration, just in general. But anybody that's ever heard me describe marathons, I mean, my pain would normally come on mile 18 and beyond. And at mile 18, there was a guy, well, so at mile 2, I think it was, there was a guy that was standing there with chicory coffee ready for me. So I grabbed a cup of coffee and on my way. Then secondarily, I got to mile 18 and I had a martini, made the turn. I think it was at mile 20, 21. I had a beer, got back to where 18 was again, because it was a loop, and essentially crossed the street, grabbed another martini, and then finished the marathon. And it had a little painkiller in me along the way. So
I'm surprised you remember this marathon.
Oh yeah. I have a feeling the alcohol didn't. Yeah, most likely my body just went, oh, I don't know what this is. It contains some portion of water.
Sweat it out.
That, and then here goes the rest, right straight out. Yeah, I don't remember any effects at all from it. So anyway, thank you so much, James, for joining me today on the podcast. I greatly appreciated our conversation and hearing all about the great things that are going on with you and Tulane and everything in New Orleans. So thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thanks.